"Daniel," my brother's voice came from somewhere beyond the trees. Soft, calm, close enough that I froze with my hand on the cabin door. The problem was, Daniel was standing behind me. I turned so quickly I nearly dropped the flashlight. My younger brother looked just as confused as I was. "You heard that too?" Before I could answer, the voice came again. "Daniel, help me." It sounded exactly like him. Same tone, same slight rasp he'd had ever since getting over pneumonia the previous winter. Except this voice came from the darkness outside. Daniel grabbed my arm. "I'm not talking." Neither of us moved. The forest had gone completely silent. No wind, no insects, no birds, nothing, just the sound of our own breathing. This is Tales of the Dark. The trip had been my idea. Our parents had rented an old cabin deep in the mountains for the start of summer break. Dad was supposed to join us 2 days later after finishing a construction job in the city. Until then, it was just me, my 17-year-old brother Daniel, Mom, and our Uncle Rob. The cabin sat nearly 12 miles from the nearest paved road. No neighbors, no cell service, just endless pine forest in every direction. It was exactly the kind of place I loved. For the first day, everything felt perfect. We fished in the creek, collected firewood, cooked burgers over the fire pit. Even Uncle Rob admitted he'd forgotten how quiet the woods could be. The silence felt peaceful, at least, at first. The first strange thing happened that evening. Daniel came inside carrying a bundle of firewood. He frowned at the pile beside the fireplace. "I thought I already brought this in." Mom laughed. "You probably forgot." "No," he pointed toward the stack. "I tied mine together with orange rope. This pile wasn't tied." None of us had seen who brought it inside. We assumed one of us had simply forgotten. Looking back, that was the first mistake. The next morning, Uncle Rob noticed fresh footprints circling the cabin, bare feet, large enough to belong to an adult. They weren't heading toward the cabin, they circled it. Once, twice, 3 complete loops, then disappeared into the trees. Mom blamed a local hunter. Uncle Rob wasn't convinced. No hunter walks barefoot. We spent the afternoon hiking to an old fire lookout marked on a faded map we found in the cabin. Halfway there, Daniel stopped. "You hear that?" I listened. Branches cracking somewhere behind us, not loud, measured, crunch, 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 like someone matching our pace whenever we stopped. It stopped too. Uncle Rob walked back down the trail. Nobody was there still. The feeling of being watched never left. That night the rain started. Not heavy, just enough to make the roof creak every few minutes. Around midnight, I woke to the sound of someone walking around outside. Slow footsteps, gravel crunching beneath careful feet. I checked the bedroom window, nothing. The flashlight beam reached only the first row of trees. Everything beyond that was swallowed by darkness. The footsteps continued for another 10 minutes. Then stopped directly beneath my window. I waited. Whoever was outside didn't move, didn't speak, didn't leave after nearly 5 minutes. There were 3 slow knocks on the wall beneath the window, not the glass, the wooden wall itself. Knock, knock, knock. I held my breath. The knocks never came again. Morning arrived with bright sunshine. The tension faded until breakfast. Mom asked Daniel why he'd been outside during the night. I wasn't. I saw someone through the kitchen window. Daniel looked genuinely confused. "I never left my room," she shrugged. I guess I imagined it, but I noticed muddy footprints on the porch, bare footprints, the same size as before. That afternoon, Uncle Rob found an old ranger station about half a mile from the cabin. Most of it had collapsed years ago. Only one room remained standing. Inside was a rusted stove, broken shelves, and dozens of names carved into the walls. Some were decades old, others looked fresh. Near the doorway, someone had carved a warning: "If it calls you, don't answer." Uncle Rob chuckled. Kids trying to scare each other. Then Daniel spoke. "What's that?" Scratched into the wood beneath the warning was a single name: Daniel, exactly the way he spelled it, with the same unusual handwriting style he always used when signing birthday cards. He stared at it for a long time. "I've never been here." None of us believed he'd carved it, but none of us could explain it either. We left before sunset. That evening the forest felt different. The wind had disappeared again. No birds sang, even the creek sounded quieter. We locked every door before dinner. After dark, Uncle Rob dealt cards while Mom made hot chocolate. Daniel seemed distracted. He kept glancing toward the windows. Finally, he admitted, "Why? I keep hearing someone whistle." Nobody else had heard it. A minute later, I did. 3 short notes from somewhere beyond the porch. Daniel's face went pale. "My friend Tyler does that whistle." "What?" "He always did it before baseball practice." Again, 3 notes, closer this time. Uncle Rob stood up. "I'm ending this." He grabbed the flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The woods were empty. Then a voice drifted through the trees. "Rob." My uncle stopped walking. It was his late father's voice, perfectly clear, perfectly familiar. My uncle stumbled backward without saying a word. He slammed the cabin door shut, locked it, pulled every curtain closed. None of us asked what he'd heard. We already knew because each of us had heard someone different. Mom heard her sister. I heard my best friend from high school. Daniel heard himself. An hour passed in complete silence. No one touched the cards, no one looked outside. Then, someone knocked on the front door. 3 slow knocks, knock, knock, knock. Uncle Rob whispered, "Nobody moves." The knocking stopped. For nearly a minute, everything was still. Then Daniel's voice came from the porch. "I forgot my flashlight." Every head in the room turned toward him. Daniel was sitting beside me. His face had gone completely white. Outside, his voice spoke again. "Open the door." Then it laughed. It wasn't loud, it wasn't angry, it sounded almost pleased. A few seconds later, footsteps crossed the porch. The wooden boards creaked beneath a slow, deliberate pace. They stopped directly outside the living room window. No one dared pull back the curtain. Then the voice returned one last time, soft enough that we almost missed it. "I know there are 4 of you in there." It paused, "and I only need one." Nobody moved. The words lingered in the room long after the voice outside fell silent. "I know there are 4 of you in there, and I only need one." The only sound left was the crackling fire. Even that seemed quieter than before. Uncle Rob slowly reached for the fireplace poker without taking his eyes off the curtains. "Nobody opens that door." Mom nodded. Daniel hadn't spoken since hearing his own voice outside. He sat perfectly still, gripping the edge of the couch so tightly his knuckles had turned white. A minute passed, then another. The footsteps on the porch never returned. Finally, Uncle Rob gathered enough courage to pull back one corner of the curtain. The porch was empty. The rocking chair moved gently back and forth, nothing else. He unlocked the front door just enough to shine his flashlight outside. The beam swept across the porch. Fresh, muddy footprints, bare feet. They led to the top step, then stopped. There were no tracks leading away. It was as if whoever had been standing there had simply vanished. Uncle Rob locked the door again. "We're leaving first thing in the morning." Nobody argued. None of us slept. Every room in the cabin felt too exposed. Instead, we stayed together in the living room until sunrise. Just before dawn, I noticed something through a narrow gap in the curtains. The tree line. Someone was standing there, too far away to make out a face. Perfectly still, watching the cabin. I blinked. The figure was gone. As soon as daylight filled the woods, we packed the truck. Nobody cared about breakfast. We just wanted to leave. The cabin looked different in the morning, smaller somehow, as if the forest had crept closer during the night. While loading the last bags, Daniel froze. My backpack. It was right here. We searched every room, every closet. Under every bed, nothing. Then Uncle Rob pointed toward the woods. The backpack was hanging from a tree branch nearly 50 yards away. None of us had walked over there. The ground between the cabin and the tree was covered in wet mud. There were no footprints, only the backpack. Daniel refused to get it. Neither did I. Uncle Rob finally walked over with the shotgun he'd brought for emergencies. He grabbed the bag. Nothing happened, but when he returned, his face had changed. He quietly unzipped the backpack. Everything inside was gone. Books, clothes, water bottle, all missing. Only one thing remained, a folded piece of notebook paper. Uncle Rob unfolded it. There was a single sentence written in shaky handwriting. Wrong one, nobody knew what it meant. He crumpled the paper and threw it into the fireplace before we left. The drive out should have taken less than an hour. Instead, we drove for nearly 3. The dirt road twisted through endless trees. Every few miles we passed the same fallen pine lying across a shallow ditch. At first I thought they all looked alike. Then I noticed the broken road sign beside it. Half the sign was missing, the remaining half read, Mile 8 40 minutes later. We passed it again, same broken sign, same fallen tree, nobody said anything. Another half hour passed, there it was again. This time Mom noticed. Didn't we already pass that? Uncle Rob slowed the truck. We did. The fuel gauge was dropping much faster than it should have. Daniel stared out the rear window. I think something's following us. I looked back, nothing. Just the empty road disappearing between towering pines. Then, a voice drifted through the open crack in Daniel's window, soft, barely louder than the wind. Daniel. He immediately rolled the window shut. The voice continued. Now it sounded closer, almost beside the truck. You forgot something. Mom started crying. Uncle Rob pressed harder on the accelerator. The truck bounced violently over potholes. None of us looked outside anymore. Nearly another hour passed before we finally reached the main highway. The moment our tires touched pavement, every strange feeling disappeared. Birds, traffic, cell service. Everything suddenly felt normal again. Nobody spoke during the drive home. Our parents tried convincing themselves we'd simply frightened one another. Stress, isolation, too many ghost stories around the campfire. Maybe they were right. For almost a week, nothing happened. Then Daniel stopped sleeping. Every morning he looked more exhausted. Dark circles formed beneath his eyes. He kept insisting someone was calling his name outside his bedroom window, always around 3 in the morning. Dad searched the yard twice, found nothing. One evening I asked Daniel exactly what he'd been hearing. He hesitated before answering. It doesn't use my voice anymore. What do you mean? It uses yours. I laughed. He didn't. I hear you asking me to come outside. I felt my stomach tighten. I've never done that. I know. The room fell silent. 3 nights later, I woke up thirsty. The house was dark. The digital clock read 3:11 a.m. As I walked toward the kitchen, I noticed the back door standing open. Dad was already there. He was staring into the yard. What happened? I thought one of you opened it. None of us had. The security light illuminated the grass. Nothing moved. Dad shut the door, locked it. The next morning he installed 2 motion cameras. It'll give your mother some peace of mind. The first night, nothing. The second, nothing. On the third morning, Dad called all of us into the living room. He replayed the footage. At 3:08 a.m. something triggered the backyard camera. The image was grainy, black and white. A person stood at the edge of the woods behind our house. Too far away to identify, completely motionless, for 23 minutes. Then, it slowly raised one arm, not waving, pointing toward Daniel's bedroom. The camera timestamp flickered when it returned. The figure was gone, no walking, no running, just gone. Dad checked the front camera. Nothing, the side camera, nothing, only the backyard. The following night, Daniel disappeared. His bedroom window was open. The screen had been removed from the outside. Police searched the neighborhood. Volunteers searched the nearby woods. Dogs lost his scent behind our house. It simply ended. Weeks became months. No phone calls, no bank activity, no evidence, nothing. People eventually stopped asking about him. Life continued, or at least it tried to. Almost a year later, I couldn't stop thinking about the cabin. Against every piece of common sense I had, I drove back, alone. The dirt road looked exactly the same. The cabin looked abandoned now, windows boarded, roof partially collapsed. The front door hung open. Inside, dust covered everything, except the living room floor. There, in the middle of the room, were 4 muddy barefoot footprints. Perfectly fresh, I followed them. They didn't lead toward the door, they led down the hallway. Into Daniel's old bedroom. The room was empty, except for one thing. Scratched into the wooden wall beside the bed were dozens of names. Hundreds maybe, some old, some fresh. Every name had a single line carved through it. Every name except one, Daniel. As I stared at it, something behind me whispered, "So close." The voice wasn't Daniel's anymore, it wasn't anyone's. It sounded like dozens of voices trying to speak at once. I turned. The hallway was empty, but the front door, the one I'd left wide open, was now slowly closing by itself. I didn't wait to see what was outside. I ran. I never looked back. The cabin still stands somewhere beyond those mountains. People still rent it. Every year someone leaves a review online saying the same thing. The woods were beautiful, but every night someone outside knew our names. If you are brave enough to hear more nightmares, subscribe to Tales of the Dark. And if you have your own terrifying experience, leave it in the comments or send your story by email. Maybe your nightmare will become the next story told here.